Welcome to the LOVELAB podcast, the place to be for honest and real talk about relationships and sex. Whether you're a man or woman, single or a couple, this is the show for you. I am your host, Kevin Anthony, and I am here to help you have the relationship of your dreams and the best sex of your life. All right, welcome back to the LOVELAB podcast. This is episode 384, and it is titled Female Orgasm Explained. Here's the latest research. Now, if you've been listening to my show for a while, you know that I've done a few shows on female orgasms or just orgasms in general. And I've talked about some stats around orgasms. But today, I have a guest with me who, if you're watching on YouTube, you can already see, that has some really interesting data. And you'll understand where she got this data from and how they figured all of this out. But there's definitely new stuff in here that I have not seen before that I think is really, really interesting, that I think could really help women understand their bodies more and how to maybe maximize their pleasure a bit more. I think it could also be really interesting for men to hear and go, oh, that's what they experience. Oh, that's what's going on there, right? So that can help you please your woman and, of course, understand her a bit more also. So I think we've got some really interesting stuff. We've also got just some simply fun, interesting data. Like, it's not necessarily, technical data that's going to help you, but it's fun nonetheless. Like, what's the most popular time that women masturbate? I bet you want to know that. What's the least popular time? What was the most popular holiday that women masturbated on last year? So we've got some fun stuff like that to share along the way as well. As always, before we do that, a few short words from my sponsors. Ladies, did you know that the overwhelming majority of men consider receiving oral sex a must in their relationship? Well, of course you did, because men have been asking you for it your whole life. But do you feel confident in your ability to give great oral sex? If you tend to avoid it because you don't like it, or you feel that you're good at it, but you could get even better at it, then my new Blowjob Mastery course is for you. I have teamed up with the amazing coach Reed Duong of Eternal Love to bring you a practical and easy to follow course that is guaranteed to increase your confidence and skill when giving oral sex to your man. In this course, you will get all the secrets to mastering the art of oral sex with step-by-step instructions and multiple live demos. Go to sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. That is sacredfemininearts.com/BJ Mastery. You've heard me tell this story on the show many times, but I did a video on my YouTube channel about what men think is a good blowjob, and it just totally blew up. And the overwhelming responses to that were primarily women going, I didn't know that. Hence, this course was born. So go check that out. And then, of course, Power and Mastery 3.0. That is the latest version of the popular men's sexual mastery course. If you're struggling with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, or simply want to increase your skills in the bedroom, then Power and Mastery is for you. Join the exclusive club of men who have taken their sexual performance into their own hands and become sexual masters. Mastering your sexuality is a key component to becoming the man she has always dreamt of and craves. Don't leave your sexual performance up to chance or the throw of the dice. Become a sexual master today by going to powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery. That's powerandmastery.com/sexual-mastery. One last thing, I really didn't promote last year, but I made these cool t-shirts. It says, more orgasms, less wars. There's the women's. We got the men's as well. That was a guest on the show who uttered that phrase. And I said, oh my God, that's great. I'm going to make a t-shirt out of that. So you can go find those on my website as well, kevinanthonycoaching.com. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get into the show. My guest today is Anna Lee, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Lioness, the world's only smart vibrator that gives you orgasm data. Previously, she was a mechanical engineer at Amazon, where she helped launch the Amazon Dash button and the Kindle Voyage. She has been named to Forbes 30 Under 30 and featured in publications including the New York Times, Glamour, and The Economist for her work in expanding the research around female pleasure. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I love that shirt, by the way. That's very cute.
Thank you. I heard, I don't know why in that moment she uttered those words and I was like, oh my God, that needs to
You're
be a
like, yes,
t-shirt.
this
I
is a
don't know
shirt. I
why.
love it. It's great.
All right. So you have a company called Lioness and you make sex toys, obviously, but with a spin because they're smart sex toys, right? They can actually track data. Before we dive into how those work and what kind of data they can track and all, how in the world did you end up going from Amazon engineer to making smart sex toys? What was that journey about?
It's funny because now that I've told this story a few times, it feels like a very linear path, but I will say like never in my life I would have bet that this is where I would be or like this is what I'm obsessed about and what I think about every single waking minute of my life. But I was previously a mechanical engineer and at Amazon, and I just knew like my parents had immigrated to the US from Korea, and I really believed in this idea of like the American dream. Like working in corporate, becoming an engineer was kind of like the golden path for my parents. And I loved it. But then I think one of the things I realized was that once I was at Amazon, I didn't feel like this was everything that it was supposed to be. Like, was I supposed to go to a cubicle every day from, 8 to 5 and then, work on a Kindle or like whatever design and then go home? And then I think one of the big moments I had was realizing that devices and like hardware products often when even when they're unisex, it's not really usually designed with women in mind, and it's because there's not a lot of women engineers or we don't see a lot of them in tech fields until like as of late. And then, very, very luckily, I met a founder of a different sex toy company. The company doesn't exist anymore. And you'll hear why is because it was a guy. And I asked him, I was like, how do you know what you're building works for women? Like, how do you know it works for vaginas? And he was like, there is this industry standard where you put the vibration on your nose, and that's what a clitoris feels like. And I remember just being like, dude, that's so crazy because I was like scared of my body growing up, and I realized like all the times that I've bought a toy and it doesn't work for me, and I'm like, dude, something's wrong with my own body. I don't know why. Why doesn't this work for me? It must work for other people. But it's really because often they weren't really designed with like women in mind, which is like the craziest thing because it's such an intimate product and it's specifically for vaginas. And that's really where I had this aha moment of like realizing that we could probably build and engineer a better vibrator. And it kind of led us into this path of like, well, what makes a better vibrator? Like, what would actually help people learn about their bodies? What would help me feel more comfortable with my own body? And what would make me feel more like reality? And we really went down the path of knowledge. And that's how all of this started about 10 years ago. And it's been a really wild journey.
I love that. Okay, obviously you had a background in engineering, right? And
Yeah.
you met this guy in the sex toy company and you're realizing that wait a minute, you're not even asking women like what they want or what they need. So like that part I get, but the other part that I love about your story is that part of this was coming from your own desire, right? Like
Yeah.
these things aren't working for me, or maybe I'm supposed to be feeling something that I'm not, or whatever it is. And I think honestly, that's that's how you really become successful. In other words, you're not just doing it because I want to make money or because I think I can out engineer somebody. Like there was a genuine desire to do something to help yourself as well as other people. And I always love companies that start that way. I think, that's a great way to do it. And of course, you get the benefit of the idea that you're not just going to a cubicle all day,
Yeah.
giving all of your time and energy away to somebody else, right? I completely understand. I worked for big tech for many, many years as well. I worked for, well, I won't say the companies, but they were very big tech companies. And I thought it was the coolest thing when I was younger, when I
Totally.
got started. I was like, oh my God. I remember I started at it was the last company that I worked for in tech, and I was only there for like 3 months. And I was assigned this guy. He was kind of my mentor, helping me learn all the systems because it was massive, this company, and the systems we worked with were just huge global scale. And then he leaves like 3 months into me starting, and they just turn to me and they're like, okay, you're now in charge of everything he was doing. I'm like, I've only been here for 3 months. But the first time I sat down and had to create a PO, I didn't even know how to use the PO system. I figured it all out. I got it all down. I go, wow, I'm spending literally $1 million of their money. And I've only been here for like 3 months and I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to I'm going to hit this button. And I just spent $1 million.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
crazy.
I totally understand where you're at. Like I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And you know, to me, it's like I'm spending $1 million. This is freaking amazing. But after a number of years of it, I got super burnt out. I was realizing that I was giving all my time and energy away to something that I didn't really care about, and that other than a paycheck wasn't really helping me or anybody else. And so
Hmm.
I ended up transitioning. Now I do something I love where I get to help people all the time, you know. So um, different but
Yeah.
similar journeys, you know.
And yeah, absolutely. I love to tell people like I truly feel like I have one of the best jobs in the world. I mean, like, well, masturbating and like learning about orgasms is like probably like the most fun way you could live your, I guess, like your day in, day out, which has been so exciting. And I think the question I get often is like, what's your day to day look like? But I mean, it's a little disappointing because it's still, at the end of the day, you're working. I'm mostly on my computer majority of the time, but people are like, your office must be so crazy and all these things. But we do have very, very funny work stories. Like we just have very silly moments and just like funny things that happen that, typically wouldn't happen at a typical work office. So I find it an absolute blessing that I get to do something that I absolutely love on day in, day out.
We get to do something with our jobs that the average person would get fired and possibly
Yeah,
sued for.
exactly. We always joke, we're like, dang, if we had like a formal HR, like, there's the funny things that we've seen, like, or the things people email us, just all sorts of silly things. And I was like, I wouldn't even know how to like navigate all of that yet.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you're having fun along with the fact that you're creating great products as well.
Yeah.
So, I want to come back to this idea and let's just talk about this a little bit. I'm curious your opinions on this because you just mentioned a moment ago that, this person you met who had a sex toy company wasn't actually, you know, getting data from women, like asking them what works for you, what doesn't work for you, like how can we make this better? And it's just like, oh, I'll just touch it to my nose kind of thing. And that is something that I've heard and seen a lot in the industry, which is, you know, it's just, well, I'm an engineer. I know how to do this. And it kind of blows my mind because as an entrepreneur myself, running my own business, it's like if I want to create a program, I don't just create a new program. I go,
Yeah.
like, okay, tell me, what are you struggling with? What is it that you are looking for? It's basic market research. And it just blows my mind that people aren't doing that.
Yeah, it's it's like there's many reasons as to why. Like I would say one is the sex toy industry is actually was historically male dominated, and I think that's this fact that actually surprises a lot of people. But at the time, actually, like sex toys were targeted for men to purchase for their significant others. So they were targeting the men that are coming into these stores and being like, "Hey, I'm trying to find a Valentine's Day gift, or I'm trying to find a way to spice up my relationship. I'm going to buy this thing with an adult entertainer on it that has like a 100 different speeds, 12 different patterns, sparkles and rotates and all of these things." And so they're really giving that wow factor for men to purchase. And so a lot of like brick and mortar retailer stores will tell you like historically it's typically been like men purchasing. We're only seeing the shift in the past like 5, 6 years where you're seeing a lot more women buy toys and you're seeing a lot more brands that are actually geared towards women purchasers. So it's definitely interesting, but I mean, it's also funny to think like, just in women's health as a whole, like it's been very, very understudied. Like I could tell you for hours about how like we don't know very much about the sexual function, but just from a health level, how like we used to test male mice but not female mice for drug tests and all of these different things. So I think it just has maybe it's one of those things that it's worked for many, many years, and so that's how people have seen like this is how we're gonna do it. But it very much trickled down to the sex toy industry as well. But I think it's only in the as of late that we're really seeing that shift happen. But it happens all the time. It all happens all the time. But it's silly that it happens for sex toys.
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole other thing that I want to talk about. Like, it's one thing for a company to not necessarily do, say, testing or surveys or whatever with women, right? Okay, that's one
Totally.
part of it as far as the simple design of the product. But you just talked about something else that's really prevalent, which is the lack of actual studies done
Yeah.
on female sexuality, pleasure, anatomy. And it is definitely something that I hear a lot out there is like, well, we don't really have any data on women. I'm like, how could you not have any data on
Yeah.
women? Like, no, granted, I understand, like, if a guy's having trouble having a boner, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's going to do anything and everything in his power
Yes,
to fix this problem.
absolutely.
Hence, all the drugs and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it does kind of, okay, maybe 40 years ago, I understand why they didn't do as much, right? Because there wasn't as much focus on, her pleasure and that sort
Hmm.
of thing. But I mean, for decades now, I feel like they got to be at least 20, maybe 30 years behind in that. Like, how are we not doing this? I mean, obviously you are, but how is the industry as a
Yes.
whole not doing this more?
No, absolutely. Actually, one of my favorite stories to tell people is um, if you Google, I think it will still happen. Maybe the AI will make it better now, but when you used to Google, like, how many nerve endings does the clitoris have, or like nerve fibers, it will always say 8,000. It'll say 8,000, 7,000, like somewhere around there. And that's the number that's been known for like decades. And like if you look at YouTube, there's like TED Talks, like big thinker talks, like they'll always quote the number 8,000. And it's only as of 20, I think 2022, because they finally did it, because they found that 8,000 number is actually from a book in the 1970s called The Clitoris. And they took a cow's clitoris, a bovine's clitoris, and they did a tissue sample. And the cow's clitoris had 8,000 nerve fibers. So then that was the quoted thing, that women have 8,000 nerve fibers. And it was not until like 2022, I think 20, yeah, like 22, like year 22, Dr. Blair Peters was doing surgeries for gender transitions, and she took a piece of the sample and was like, okay, I'm going to test what a female clitoris actually has, and it's over 10,000 nerve fibers. And that is a number we didn't know until literally 4 years ago, which I think is crazy. And it has a lot of implications because it talks about, well, when we do surgeries near that area, like how many nerve fibers are we actually having to consider that we're not going to damage, and like all these different things. And it's literally that's a 4 years ago knowledge. And they, before we were quoting a cow's clitoris, which I think is crazy.
I
Also,
mean,
the fact that cows have clitorises is also kind of like mind blowing to me.
yeah, but yeah, this is the kind of stuff that blows my mind too, because, okay, like I understand where you might be using animals as substitutes, but you can't make definitive statements based on that. So, in other words, let's say you have a new drug that's supposed to, potentially increase blood flow to a clitoris. You could take an animal and you could say, let's try it on that and see if it has the desired effect and see if it has any side effects that we're not aware. That I understand. But
Yeah.
that's not the end of the story. You can't say then, well, then this drug works on a human clitoris
Yes.
because you didn't try it on a human clitoris, right? So yeah, it just blows my mind that that's the kind of stuff that even, I mean, we think we're so advanced, we're in 2026, but yet we're just starting to do some of this stuff. It really does blow my mind.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I hope that by having discussions like this, by the way, that we will inspire people to do more of this research, right? So if anybody's listening to this who happens to be in the field, like, hey, there's a lack of data here. Maybe we ought to research it a little bit more. And I hope too that people who are listening who aren't in the field can start to actually ask for stuff like that. Like the
Yeah.
more people make their voices heard, like, hey, we want more data on them. We want to understand our bodies better. And this is important, right?
And
Maybe
even
we can.
anecdotal data, actually, like even if it's just you self experimenting with yourself, like that's like a big, I'm such an advocate of like self experimentation. I'm like, oh, this works for me, this doesn't, or this might be a little different. And like post it on Reddit or something because it'll resonate with somebody. And then if it gets bigger, like that's how things get studied. And we won't know unless people say things. But a lot of times we just assume our body is like either not normal, or we're too scared to talk about it, or we're like, oh, I don't know, like maybe that's just what happens and we just leave it as is. But there might be tons of things we just don't know but we need more people to tell us their stories.
Yeah. And, that's one of the reasons why I like to do this show is because the more we talk about things of, a sexual nature, whether it's how our bodies work or what our experiences are with ourselves or with our partners, the more we normalize it, the more we make it okay for people to actually talk about it.
Yeah.
For years, I had this, I just couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that a lot of women really didn't know much about their own genitals. And
Mm-hmm.
because I was always looking at it from the point of view of a man, I'm like, as a man, we know every millimeter of our genitals. We've looked at it 1,000 times from every angle. We've like thrown our backs out trying to like see parts of it, right? Like,
Yes,
that's
yes.
how we are as men, right? And I just couldn't understand how women didn't explore and know more about it. But over the years, having talked to a lot of women and having a lot of female sex experts on my show, and I asked a lot of them that exact question. And the overwhelming answer I got was, well, there's a lot of shame, and we're not supposed to
Mm-hmm.
do that, and we shouldn't talk about it, and we're not supposed to look at it, and we're not supposed to show it, and like all that kind of stuff that really got in the way and prevented women from experimenting with their own bodies. And so
Definitely.
yeah, and so that's why I love having these types of conversations because it gives people permission to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be the first person to say like knowledge is pleasure. The more you masturbate, the more you learn about yourself, like the better everything gets, like your relationships, your sexual enjoyment, everything. So I'm a huge advocate.
Well, that's a really good point that you bring up too, right? Which is, when people are in couples, sometimes I think, well, now that, we're dating or now that we're married or now that we're living together or whatever it is, it's like, you're not going to masturbate anymore,
Yeah.
right? You don't need that. I'm here, right?
Yes. Yes. Kevin, I will say like that's probably the thing that if I do like a booth or, like anything, like we're showcasing the Lioness, probably most often the feedback I get is like, well, my partner doesn't want me to have one because, we're in a relationship, or like my partner doesn't know that I masturbate, or like why would I like I'm too scared to bring it up to like get a sex toy when I'm in a relationship, or it's like the guy being like, oh, like I don't want her to have one because it's like replacing me, yada yada yada. And I at some point actually had a little printout from a research paper that was like, and I laminated it and it was like fit in my wallet, that there's many research studies showing like people that have a sex toy and are in a relationship always have higher satisfaction in their sexual pleasure like life. And like it's the idea that that they masturbate or like they own a toy, and it's like that there's a higher sexual satisfaction in that relationship. And I'd always pull it out being like, I don't really understand why we keep saying like sex toys are exclusive for if you're single and like you can't have it with a partner, because it just makes everything better. um yeah, it's a one that I still get, and I like hasn't really changed in the past 10 years, which is a bit of a bummer.
Well, hopefully we can change that. Audience, I hate to break it to you. Everybody masturbates when they're in a
Yes.
relationship, whether they tell you about it or not. Everybody does,
And
and
it's
that's
probably for the better, yeah.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Is I mean, especially in today's busy world, right? Like people are not making as much time for connection and intimacy and sex as they should be, right?
Yes.
And so they are going long periods of time without really any stimulation, right? And if they're allowed to freely and openly, masturbate on their own, whether toys or not, that's going to help stoke that fire. That's going to increase their libido and make them want more, and then hopefully bring them closer together. Now, of course, with vibrators, men can get a little jealous, so to speak. Like you said, oh, it's going to replace me, or she's going to like that better than I am. And I think that's the root behind a lot of the, men's hesitations towards their women masturbating.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's because they're looking at it from the fear side, not from the other
Yeah.
side of the equation, which is, this might actually spark her libido. She might get so
Yes.
turned on that she wants the real thing and come jump on me, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I always say like, a sex toy's not gonna cuddle me, or like I'm not gonna go to the movies with a sex toy. Like I never understood the replacement part. It's very silly. But I will say like we do like different sex experiments of like seeing what kind of factors make people have better orgasms and things like that. And actually, mutual masturbation is one of the sex experiments we run. So we encourage people to do mutual masturbation. And it's consistently over the years, we've seen longer, stronger orgasms when people do mutual masturbation together. So it's a huge thing that I also encourage that. I think sometimes people feel a little like nervous about, but I'm always like, it's so like low, it's low pressure on both people. It's hot. Like it's such an easy thing to do. It's going to maybe like help guarantee an orgasm for everyone involved. And it's consistently, we've seen better orgasms through mutual masturbation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. This is another funny thing, having worked in this industry for a long time, you see these patterns of these kind of things that just persist, right? And one of them is that people don't want to masturbate in front of their partners. And it's so funny. They'll do it like any other sex act, but somehow masturbation in front of their partner is like this edge that they just can't get past, right? And I'm always telling people as a sex educator, no, you want to do that because you want to show them, here's what I like. Here's what works for me.
Exactly.
Here's how I do it. Pay attention. You might learn
Yeah.
something.
100%. Yes, absolutely.
All right. Let's dive a little bit more into uh, the products
Yeah.
and then what you've learned from it. So byproducts, I mean, we're not going to sit here and talk about, well, this product does this and that, but I'm curious really about, we've been talking a whole lot about this idea that there's a lack of data. So
Hmm.
I'm curious about, how did you solve that problem? What is your approach? How did you create a sex toy that could actually get data?
Yeah, I honestly, when we first started, we were looking at the concept of an AI vibrator. And this is 10 years ago before, we really had this big boom of AI. And we had this idea like maybe, the more you use it, it gets to know you better. So it starts moving, it changes vibration over time, like it knows what you like. But I think one of the hardest things we started doing was we started researching as many research papers as possible of like what happens, like what is high arousal, what does an orgasm look like for women. And we realized there was so little research on it, and we couldn't train even an AI model to even say like, well, what is pleasurable and what is not. And so when we started doing interviews with like users and understanding like what their needs were, one of the big things was like, well, I don't really care for like an AI vibrator. Like I know what I like, but how do you know, like how would you know like what I like or like what is most arousing? And we were like, well, there's this like a couple studies that were done, especially from the 1980s, where during an orgasm there's a unique pelvic floor contraction that happens. So how your pelvic floor muscles squeeze and relax. And so that's where we really started of like, okay, like they're like, I want to see what that data looks like. Like I want to see what my own orgasm data looks like and how that can change. And so that really gave us the moment, and with this movement of things like the Fitbit, the Aura Ring, and like being able to have better understanding of your body through data points. And so we really want to bring that for sexual pleasure. Because I think the number one question we get asked the most is, am I normal? It's people wondering like, hey, my body does this, or I'm not able to get to an orgasm very often, or like I feel like I'm getting really close and then I don't feel anything. Like, is that normal? And so we really wanted to give this idea of like, well, the more you know about your own body and the data, and we're able to just show like, well, this is what typical looks like, but this is also what we know that some people go through and how it can change, and really pushing this idea of knowledge. And so that's how we started this idea of giving people this idea to give, like, get data about their own pleasure and their own orgasms and really help understand what's working for them, what's not, what's making it better. Maybe there are factors in your life that you didn't even realize is changing your orgasm and arousal, and really trying to get dig a little deeper. Because I think the biggest thing that a lot of sex therapists will tell you is to have a sex journal of like, this is what's worked for me, this is like what's not. But we're really just taking that and then amplifying it with some data behind it, and then also just giving you the opportunity to like reflect a little bit on your experience. Because I think, I don't always masturbate and then I'm like, dear diary, like this is what I thought about it. Sometimes people are just like moving on with their day. And so we just want to give that moment of like just that couple minutes of like, oh, like self-reflection and thinking about how it was for them and all of that.
Yeah, I think that is also very fascinating in the sense that you started out with this idea of, we want to make a device that adjusts to what you like.
Hmm.
And then that brought you around to the fact that we don't actually know what we like because there's no data
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really interesting, right? Uh, it's an example of one of those things. Like we thought we were going to make one product, we thought this is
Yes.
what we were going to do, and then we realized, whoa, there's this whole other area that's basically unknown, and we need to solve that first before we can even go in the other direction.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
So I know that you have identified what you're calling sort of three recurring shapes, and this is some of the data that you've gotten. So you were just talking about the pelvic floor contractions, right?
Hmm.
What are those shapes? And like maybe you could explain what they are and maybe describe them a little bit so women listening can be like, oh, that one kind of sounds like me.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yes. So, one of the biggest things that we were studying is during an orgasm, a very unique pattern happens, like how your pelvic floor muscles involuntary squeeze and relax. Very often, you'll see kind of this like squeeze and relax that doesn't really change in force. So one of the biggest things that we worked on, which was it was so incredibly exciting, was we worked with Dr. Jim Faust of Prague University and Dee Hartman and working on this idea of like, well, what are the patterns that show during an orgasm? And we actually identified three unique patterns that can happen. We gave them very much cuter names, the wave, the avalanche, and the volcano. But really, it was based a lot on a research paper done in the 1980s by Bolin. But it actually, he only had a sample size of, I believe, like 8 women. So the idea was to really expand that because we have so much more data, so much more power to do more insights. And so we had 54 users basically participate in this research study, and we were able to separate it out into three unique patterns. The wave is the most common. It's the very squeeze, the one I was talking about is like very squeeze and relax, squeeze and relax. It typically doesn't change much in force. So you're just kind of seeing the squeeze and relax and then it kind of ends. The avalanche is the second least most common one. Starts much higher in force. So you kind of see this explosion of force and you still have that squeeze and relax like a wave, but it tapers down. So it starts sloping downward. So it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. And then the volcano, which is the rarest one, is kind of your classic how they would describe it in movies, how they show it and depict it in movies. It's this huge explosion of force, not much of a contraction, and then just this huge drop in force, and then it's just kind of like one giant bump. So those are the three patterns. And the fun fact that we like to tell people that people love to argue about is that typically we don't see people jump from one pattern to another pattern. So for example, I'm actually a wave pattern. So all my data typically shows is squeeze and relax. In the 10 years that I've been using the Lioness, maybe once or twice I've ever seen it change to an avalanche, but I've never been able to see a volcano type. But a lot of people write into us all the time being like, no, I swear I can have all three. I can prove it to you. Like, people are like, when I'm with other partners, I get a volcano orgasm. Sometimes I have a wave, ocean wave, but really we haven't seen it through the data quite yet. But we love people that are so passionate about it because I'm like, yes, these are the people we need. Like, please donate your data because that's how we're going to be able to expand our research. But as of current, we don't see typically people jumping from one pattern to another pattern.
I'm curious. I don't know if you have any data on this, but obviously there are clitoral orgasms, G-spot orgasms, cervical orgasms. Do the type of orgasm that a woman has affect what pattern they are?
That's a great question. That's often something that's get often asked to us. I will say at least from the ones that we've seen or people have like sent us in or like contributed to our research, we haven't seen the pattern change because of the different types of orgasms. We actually had a woman who was able to get to an orgasm without actually touching her genitals in any shape or form. So like really using her mind and like contraction, like her like core engagement. And so we thought maybe we would see something uniquely different, but actually what we saw during the orgasm was still that very involuntary pelvic floor contraction, squeeze and relax. But yeah, that's something we need to study a lot more. I would say like we did a lot of it through anal orgasms, vaginal and clitoral, but not so much of the other ones. So it'd be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I was just wondering because if a woman is saying, well, when I'm with this guy, I can have this kind of pattern. When I'm with this one, I have this kind of. I was just curious if we had enough data to really see like certain things would create certain types of patterns, right?
Yeah, yeah. I would say like the way that I see the data change, like especially from like mine, for example, it's not so much that the patterns change. It's the same patterns, the ocean wave, for example, but it's like much, bigger squeezes and relaxes, or like longer. The orgasm is longer in itself, or like faster squeeze and relaxes. So it still has that wave pattern for me, but it just changes in like the length or the strength or something like the frequency and things like that.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. It sounds like
Yeah.
there's still more research that needs to be done.
I know. It's a really sexy way to talk about orgasms too, huh? Being like, oh, well, the frequency is just like much faster. Yeah. But that's usually how I end up talking about it.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fascinating,
Yeah.
honestly. And even though I may not be a woman and I'm not experiencing these things, I want to know, what is my partner experiencing? You
Yes.
know?
Actually, we've have a couple of users that have penises because you can insert it anally and you still get the same data. You still have pelvic floor contractions. I will say typically we've seen them always be ocean waves. We haven't seen the avalanche or volcano types in men, but it's definitely usable. You definitely will still get the same like contraction data.
Oh, that is interesting. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. We might have to try
I
that.
know. See? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I need to take a short break.
Yes.
But when we come back, we've got a lot more stats to talk about. Average female orgasm length, all kinds of stuff. I got a bunch of stats right here. So I think people, if you found the different types interesting, you'll find some of the other stats interesting too. And I'd also love towards the end to dive a little bit more into some of the experiments. You mentioned one of them, but
Yes.
I know you've done others that are really interesting as well. So on the other side of the break, we'll dive into that.
Perfect.
Ladies, are you tired of always picking the wrong guy? Does it seem like there just aren't any good men out there? Are you struggling with your sexuality? Or do successful relationships seem like a mystery you can't quite crack the code of? Then it's time to get help. Check out my women's relationship and sex coaching program. In this program, we will work on removing sexual shame, becoming confident in your body, learning the sexual secrets that drive him wild, what to really look for in a man when dating, how to break old patterns like always choosing the wrong guy, and so much more. This is your opportunity to learn everything you have ever wanted to know about men while also creating real lasting change in your life. You can go to kevinanthonycoaching.com/women. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/women to check that out. I always like to say, if you're a woman and you want to do sex coaching and you want somebody to step you through your body and your own pleasure, there's so many great female sex practitioners out there who can help you with that. But if you're in that space of like, I can't understand men, I don't know why they do what they do. I don't know what they like, what they want. I don't know how to interact with them in the relationship. I don't know how to communicate with them. This is a place where I can really help you. I can really give you exactly how men work, how we think, what we do, right? It's like getting the playbook to your man. So go check that out. KevinAnthonyCoaching.com/women. Okay. So back to the data. We were just talking about the recurring shapes when women orgasm. Let's talk about the orgasm itself. In other words, you're figuring out that there's a sort of a peak force to it. There's also
Mm-hmm.
a length to it. Let's talk a little bit about some of those things so we can kind of understand that. Like we know there's a pattern, right? So potentially there's a wave pattern, but in that wave, you're also able to measure peak force and length. So what have you learned from that data?
Yeah. So what we have is force sensors in the Lioness. So what we're measuring is how strong and like how you're squeezing on those force sensors through your pelvic floor contractions. And so we've seen a lot of really interesting things, but I would say the biggest thing is that we do a thing called Pleasure Wrapped every year. And we've done it for the past 3 years, and it's aggregating all of our users' data anonymously and just from an aggregate perspective of like what is a typical. So, what is a typical length to masturbate? What is a typical length of an orgasm? How strong is a typical orgasm? Um, Another really fun fact I love to tell people that always blows people's minds is The average strength of an orgasm is 69.7 gram force. And I know for a fact, like 69.7 gram force means nothing to anybody. Like what does that feel like? And so I actually did a little experiment on like getting household items to being like, okay, like what is that force? And that force is about the force to snap a skinny hot Cheeto in half. So you get a little hot Cheeto, or like, if you like the cheese ones, that's the cheese puffs or whatever. But it's about the force to snap that. It can't crack an egg. Your anal muscles can probably squish a blueberry. But yeah, so that's about the force. We've seen things like in the past 3 years, it's been very consistent. The typical length of an orgasm that we've seen is 28.3 seconds. So that's about how long an orgasm lasts for a female orgasm. And then a typical length of a session is about 8 minutes and 18 seconds. And that's also been consistent around for the past 3 years.
Yeah, so a couple of different things that you shared there. One, I find the force really interesting.
Yeah.
So you can, all right, ladies, you can snap a Cheeto in half with your vagina.
Yeah. It's a good party trick, I think.
I'm curious. I would love to see. I'm going to just throw this out there. Uh, you know that there are women who specifically train their pelvic
Yes.
floor muscles. I would be curious if you could get a couple of those women into your study and
Yes.
see if there's a difference between the strength of their orgasm as far as the force that's created versus the average woman. I'm willing to bet that there is a measurable difference in the force that they can create.
I'm sure. I absolutely believe it. So if anyone is listening and they think that like I have very strong pelvic floor muscles, please write in because I would love to hear it. Actually, speaking of another really interesting study that we did the past year, that was led by pelvic floor physical therapist and also researcher Dee Hartman. Something really interesting that she did was she had people use the Lioness and do Kegel exercises. So doing like long holds, but also short bursts so that we can understand how their fast twitch muscles work and slow twitch muscles work. And the idea was to try to squeeze it as hard as you can. And consistently, what she's seen very often is that what you can squeeze voluntarily is actually much weaker than what your involuntary muscles do during an orgasm. So orgasms always tend to be a lot stronger. We've seen it in my data too, and she was so excited because she was like, "Oh my gosh, like your data looks just exactly like what we're looking for." So yeah, so tips, Kegel exercises. So one of the things she wants to kind of further on that research is the idea that maybe orgasms are actually extremely health beneficial in terms of like for things like urinary incontinence, pelvic floor prolapse, and things like that, because it can actually work your muscles in a much stronger way than what Kegels can actually do. So that's another research that we've done that's been super exciting for what the technology that we have.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you right now that the answer to that is yes. And it'll be really cool when the data catches up, right? Because we
Yes.
know for sure that orgasms have tons of benefits. We know from the data you have so far that they're stronger than voluntary contractions, right? So of course, then if they're stronger than voluntary contractions, they're going to be more beneficial than doing your Kegels. Well, at least if you have enough of them anyway, because
Yes.
consistency
Yes,
would be the
exactly.
key. But I think it would also be amazing to actually have the data to back that up and tell everybody, okay,
Yeah,
look,
because
here's why you have to go out and have all the orgasms you can.
yeah, you got to have 6 orgasms before you come back to your next appointment. And
That's
like,
right.
my dream is to actually see it being able to get it at a pharmacy. Like if I go to Kaiser or like, wherever doctor, and then you get prescribed a sex toy and like being able to pick that up at the pharmacy. That's the goal.
What a world we would live in if your
Yeah.
doctor, like there's a classic meme, little cartoon that I see go around every so often on social media, and it's a doctor and the patient, and the patient's like, "Well, okay, what are you prescribing to me?" And the doctor's like, "I want you to go outside and get X amount of sunlight and blah 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 blah," all the stuff that they never actually tell you. But imagine that, but your doctor's actually telling you you need to have X number of orgasms before
Yes.
you come back for your next visit. Like, yes, that's the world we want to
I
live in.
think we would all be
Remember,
kinder,
more
honestly.
more orgasms, less wars. Right?
Exactly. You got it. You got it.
That would be amazing. And I think I think we will get there. It's just going to take a little bit more time. But studies like yours and the data that you're compiling is really what's going to help us get there. And by the way, for people listening, when she's talking about these studies, these are actually published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine. So we're not just
Yeah.
talking about, oh, a company's compiling some data here. These are like actual studies done with actual scientific methods that are published in actual journals. So just
Yes,
to put
yes.
that out there.
Yes, as much fun it is to run like a sex toy business, but I would say like our like bread and butter core that every single person on our team and the reason that they stick around and like want to work online is so much is that our main mission is to expand the research around female sexual function and just get as much research out there and like do whatever we can to help other researchers be able to do those research studies. So one of the biggest things we work on is our research arm and like everything, all of our data, we don't sell it or anything like that. The data is privately yours. The only time we actually are able to publish studies like this is if you opt in to our research platform, and that's the only time we connect your data to a researcher anonymously. You have a research ID, so you'll never be, it's not saying like my mom from LA, age whatever, and so the idea is that we really are grateful to our users who are also excited about research and they donate a lot of their data to be able to expand the research around this, and it's been really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's so needed. It really is. We really need to expand the data and the research in these areas. And
Yes.
I think we're finally getting to a place where we can talk about these things and do these studies and publish them and get the data out there. So that's really amazing. Let's talk about a few more of the stats. So we mentioned orgasm length, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
interesting things about that was, I believe that what I wrote in my notes, because I know we talked about this previously, was that the average female orgasm was 27.4 is what I wrote down. Uh,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Somewhere right around there, right? That's 28-ish seconds
Yes. Yes.
that the orgasm itself lasts, which is pretty impressive when you compare that to the average male orgasm,
Yes.
which you had told me. I didn't actually know this number, but you had mentioned 7 to 11 seconds, is
Yes,
what
that
I
is
wrote down.
correct.
So that's a big disparity there. In other words, like the female orgasm can last like 3-ish times longer than the male orgasm.
Yes.
You know, that you ladies, I understand that there are some benefits to being a male in this world, but that's a pretty good benefit to being a female.
I will
You get
say
triple the
yes.
orgasm.
Anytime I post about it or like, I do a lot where I share my own data online so that people just like kind of get the concept and just feel like it's normal to being like, oh, like this is what my data looks like. And I will say, yes, most commonly men are always like, what? Like women's orgasms last like almost 30 seconds. Like, and they're so jealous of that. But yeah, we've seen some women who donate their data that are like even longer, like 1 minute, 90 seconds, like a minute and a half. So it's really cool. Like the female orgasm definitely is a little bit more difficult to get to, and it takes longer to get to an orgasm. But yeah, 30-second orgasm, I would say, like compared to a guy's like 7 to 11 is pretty amazing.
It is for sure. And as a guy myself who practices, being able to hold and control my
Yes.
ejaculation, I can tell you that, sometimes when a woman really like explodes in a deep orgasm, like you have to hang on for a significant amount of time while she's just like she's hitting you like you just got zapped by lightning, right?
Yes.
And it's just like,
Yes.
oh my God, as you're trying to hold on and it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. That's pretty
Yes.
amazing.
It really is. The female orgasm so it's just so interesting and so nuanced. It's so cool, but
Just like women.
yeah.
They're so interesting and
Yes,
so
exactly.
nuanced.
Exactly. It fits the bill.
Why should their orgasm be any different? A couple other interesting things that I saw here in the stats. So you have some data on how long it takes women to orgasm. And that
Hmm.
was actually also broken down by age groups. So in the ages 31 to 40, it was about 10 minutes. But in the ages of 51 to 60, it was technically, when I did the math, it was 3.65 minutes.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
big difference. Why do you think there's such a difference? Why can older women get to their orgasm faster than younger women?
That's a great question. This is also a study that was published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, also led by D. Hartman. And it was actually such a surprising one. And I would say, like, very often, this is the one that a lot of women, you know, get really surprised by, but also, like, older women get so excited by because not only did we see that 31 to 40-year-olds have take the longest to get to an orgasm, around 10 minutes. And our idea is that you're probably like, it's also when a lot of hormonal changes are happening and you're still like learning a lot about your own body. So there could be different factors, like maybe pregnancy, post pregnancy, just like different things, stress, like different stress factors in your day. That could be leading to taking longer to an orgasm, but 10 minutes is around the typical average that we've seen. But they do tend to have the longest orgasms, which is around 30 seconds. But the cool thing is that 51 to 60-year-olds, they are the fastest to orgasm, but they also have the strongest orgasms. And I would like to chalk it up to the idea that the more you get seasoned and you know more about your body and you're more empowered within your body, you just have better orgasms and you get to it faster. So I always tell people like, I'm excited. Like I think there's so many things to look forward to as you get older because there's like always this like media misconception that like as you get older that you're not no longer a sexual being, which is such a sad thing to hear. But what we've seen across is that very often the people that are purchasing Lionesses are in the older demographic. And yeah, they're the ones that are writing in and they're saying like, oh, I got one all for my girlfriends. We talk about it at brunch. We show each other our data. We talk about what worked, what didn't. And you could just see that they're so sexually empowered in so many ways that I think a lot of us in our like 20s and 30s are really trying to figure out and navigate and figure out what it means to have pleasure for ourselves versus for others. I think there's a lot of times you kind of worry about what your partner's, like you're worrying about your partner and all of these different things. But I think they just have a much more sexually embraced superpower that I think is incredible. And it's so cool to see how strong their orgasms can get.
Yeah, we could theorize as to why that is, and I have some potential
Yes.
thoughts on it myself. But what the reason I really wanted to highlight that stat was for exactly what you just said, to bust this misconception that when you get older, your sex life sucks, you don't have sex anymore, you're not orgasming, like you're washed up, you're done, you might as well just hang your genitals up on the wall because it's
Yes.
over, right? And that's not at all what the data suggests. It's not what my own
Yeah.
personal experience suggests being in my 50s now. And it's not
Yeah.
what a lot of women and men tell me. So I just thought, like, here's the data to back that up.
Yes. And it's like something that should be so exciting and what people look forward to. But yeah, anecdotally, I've just all the people that have ever come up to me and like talked to me, like they're typically in their like 50s and 60s, and they're the ones that are like unfiltered, telling me all the different things and fun stories, things that I should try. And it's been so exciting to really be like understanding the community more. And I think it's such an underserved community in a lot of ways. Like a lot of times I think products aren't usually made with them in mind or, especially like I think in the sexual pleasure space. And so it's really, really cool to just see, there's just so much more to learn. But yeah, I love telling people like 50 to 60-year-olds have the strongest orgasms.
Well, there is a thing that happens as we get older, which is we stop giving a shit, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the, especially for women, a lot of the psychological stuff that might be getting in the way, you tend to
Yes.
let go of and
Yes.
like, you know what? I'm going to talk to everybody about my orgasms. Whereas when you're younger,
Yes.
you don't want to talk about it at all. So that's definitely part of what happens there, which is great because then you get to get the actual data, like, and they're happy to share it with you. Like, let me tell you
Yes.
about my last, 5 sessions and what I experienced and all that
Yes.
stuff. So that's great.
Incredible.
Okay, we are getting close to the end. There are definitely a few more stats I want to talk about, some things that I thought were fun, and then maybe we could talk about a couple of experiments as well before we wrap up. But um, when we were talking about the average length of time it took to orgasm, I do want people to know that that was using a sex toy. That was through a masturbation
Yes.
session. Uh, I don't want men thinking that, well, we had sex for 9.96 minutes. She should be having an orgasm by now.
Yes, yes.
It's going to be different. And of course, the studies that we do that have been done that we know about when it comes to how long it takes women to orgasm through actual intercourse, it's closer to 20 or 30 minutes.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I want to just preface that before we go into some of this other data, like the average session length, which was 8 minutes and 18 seconds.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that was the average length, right? That a woman was using the toy, correct?
yes, and I will say like you're absolutely correct because this is really the idea that it's in a perfect condition of like, there's no other things happening. You probably like chose this moment to masturbate. Like this is like a very ideal time. And one of the most interesting things we've seen about that is you can also rate your sessions from 0 stars to 5 stars. And most often, 5 star sessions tend to actually be longer. So I think that's a fun thing that we often tell people because I think a lot of people try to get to like a faster orgasm, but we've seen like the orgasms are typically much longer and better, and people rate them as better if the sessions are longer. So we usually tell people like it's actually better like to take more time, really get into it, do a lot more in terms of like mindful masturbation, really getting into your body and like take longer. So we've seen like 10+ minute sessions actually be just typically have more 5 stars than, and then the shorter sessions tend to have like 1 to 3 stars. So it's like a really fun fact we tell people because I think people always want to get to a faster orgasm, but I will say better orgasms tend, like the data at least shows that the longer you take, the better the orgasm is.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at all to hear that because the longer you take, the more sexual energy you're building in
Mm-hmm.
your body, and therefore, the more energy is getting moved and released when you actually orgasm. And this is something it's a conversation I have with women a lot. I did an ad at the midway of the show for my women's coaching program, and this is a conversation I often have with female clients when I'm working with them. I say, ladies, I get it. I understand why you go for the quick orgasm because most of your men can't last long enough. So you're like,
Gotta get it
I
in.
gotta get it
Yeah.
in. I gotta get something, right? And so you're racing for it. I said, I get it. I understand. And if you are able to hold off on, my wife when she was alive, she used to call that fast clitoral orgasm the genital sneeze. It's just
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
quick explosive boom and I'm out kind of thing.
Yes.
But if you can take the time to go longer to build that sexual energy, you can actually have 5-star orgasms
Yes.
as your women report it. So that's something that I hope women listening hear. Like, don't just go for the quickie because when it comes to sex with their partners, they're doing it because they just want to get one in because he's probably can't last long enough. But they also tend to do the same thing with their masturbation. Oh, just get it over with. Like I noticed that
Move on with my day kind of thing. Yeah.
exactly that these days a lot of women tend to masturbate just like men. That's exactly the way a man would approach it. Like I'm horny. I just want to, let one go and hurry up and move on with my day. Like that's how a lot of men would approach it. Now,
Yeah.
I tell men not to approach it that way also. But but I just find it interesting that a lot of women tend to do that as well. And so now you have the data to show, no, ladies, it's in your best interest if you slow down a little bit.
Yes, actually, going back to that of like a lot of the sex experiments we've done, I think a lot of them tend to all gear towards to have better orgasms. It's everything about setting intention. So we've done like a mood setting one. That's always kind of increasing orgasm. Edging is like an absolute like I will say like if you can choose if people ask me like what is the best way to have an orgasm, like what's the hack, like what do I eat something, do I whatever, if not caffeine, if not THC, I will say edging is probably the most accessible. You could do it anywhere. Like you don't need to buy anything. It's going to increase the orgasm and make it much, much stronger. Mindful masturbation, mood setting, mutual masturbation, things like that have always kind of seen the better orgasms. And it's everything to do with like intention setting within that masturbation session.
Yeah. And for women listening again, like think about that. Think about incorporating some of those things into your practice. You don't have to just hurry up and do the one and done and I'm out of here
Yeah.
kind of a thing. Like you can actually set the mood. And edging, I mean, edging, that's a thing that people always think of as a male practice, right?
Yes,
Oh, that's
yes.
just a male practice. And it's like, no, ladies, you can actually edge also. And I can say I've had partners where like we're making love and I can feel that she's close. And from my perspective, I'm like, go for it, baby. And
Yeah.
she's like, no, I just want to stay right here. Like, I want to
Yep,
kind of
yep.
ride that edge for a while and then go later on. And that is something that is available to women, whether you've realized it or not. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's see. We already talked about average orgasm length. Another stat you had on here was 22% of the recorded sessions had multiple orgasms. That's
Yes,
cool.
I was actually really surprised by that because I am a one and done person very often, and I knew that some people might do like multiple orgasms, but I felt like 22% was actually quite high, and it was, I think, on average more than two orgasms within that session. So people are using it like three, like for the session, the length, the duration of like three orgasms or more. And I thought that was actually very surprising because it's just the like, and I think those are like the fun facts where you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And being like, oh, maybe I should try that too. Because clearly these 22% of people know something that I don't know. And I'm like, okay, maybe I should like work on something like that.
I would be curious to know if out of that 22%, how many of them were in the 51 to 60 group?
That would be interesting, actually. Maybe that's the next study we do because, yeah, I would love anything that stacks the more awesome facts about 51, 60-year-olds.
I don't know if this is true, but I'm just curious if, that age group, because they're already getting to their orgasm faster, if they tend to be more multi-orgasmic than
Yeah,
younger age.
yeah.
I'd be if you ever figure that out, let me know. I'd love
Yes,
to know that data.
absolutely.
Um, okay, a couple of other fun little things here. And the most popular time to masturbate, apparently, uh, it was Sunday at 8 p.m. Like,
Yes.
I don't know, when do you usually masturbate?
That's a great question. I'm actually doing my aggregate data of like 2025 data, and I actually have it somewhere. Let me see if I can pull it up really fast. Um, Mine's are a little odd because I did it last year too, and I think my last year's most popular hour of the day was like 12 p.m. So many people wrote in being like, "Don't you have work? Like, what do you mean you're doing it at 12 p.m.?" And then I was like,
It's
"Well,
my company.
yeah, I
I
was like, it's
make
a little
vibrators.
nuanced. It's like it's part of my job, but also a lot of times I'm working from home and this all thing." So it was very funny. Okay, let me see. I found mine. So mine is August was the most popular month. And then 12 p.m. is again the most popular time of day for me. And then my second most popular is 7 p.m., which is I think a little more normal, like I think a little more acceptable for a lot of people. And then my most popular day of the week was Tuesday, which
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you why. I don't know why it's Tuesday. I didn't actually even think that it was going to be Tuesday either.
Tuesdays at noon. Well, I'm glad I record on
Yeah,
Mondays, or we would have had a scheduling conflict.
that's true. Actually, the last year when I released my own data too, everyone was like, "Oh, we like." I think last year's was Wednesday, and someone's like, "Oh, I guess we shouldn't ping Anna on Wednesdays." And I was like, "That's really funny."
Yes, you shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, I guess not, especially at noon, lunchtime.
Yep. Apparently, according to this, the least popular time was Wednesdays at 3 a.m.
Yes, witching hour. Yes, and it's always been like that. Like the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. is always the least popular, which I mean, like, I think makes sense. Most people aren't awake. And this is 3 a.m., like, depending on like time zone wise, like it's like every time zone and then 3 a.m. And I would say that makes sense because it's very often like your Wednesday is like you're kind of in the thick of work. You're not up at 3 a.m. at all. And then weekends tend to be a little bit more popular.
I'll tell you what I got out of that when I read that stat. I was like, okay, 3 a.m. is the least popular. But that means that there's a lot of women up masturbating at 1 a.m., 2
Yeah.
a.m., 5 a.m., 4 a.m.
That's true. I mean, I think I always say like it's probably like people trying to go to sleep, and so they're like, "Oh, I need to get to sleep," and like masturbating is a good way to do that. Or like when the first thing in the morning, and then a way to kick off your day. So
I have heard women tell me, like, especially when they're going through menopause and they're having trouble sleeping. I have had a lot of women tell me, like, they wake up at 5 in the morning just because they can't sleep, and they're like, well, I'll masturbate. So I'm
yeah,
not
yeah,
totally surprised by that.
makes sense to me.
All right, a couple more fun things. Uh, so in 2024, apparently the most popular holiday to masturbate was Groundhog Day. That's got to be
Yes.
some random coincidence. But 2025 surprised me. And I think it says a little something about where we're at.
Yeah.
Apparently in 2025, Valentine's Day was the most popular day to masturbate.
Yes.
And
And that holidays, no, tell me.
that tells me there's a lot of single people on Valentine's Day.
Or, people interested in like mutual, like using a sex toy within their relationship during
Okay, well, if
Valentine's Day.
that's skewing the numbers, then I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows?
if
But
it if it's a bunch of ladies who are home sad that they're single and masturbating instead, then I was like, oh man, that's not cool.
yeah, I was really surprised. I would say like the Groundhog's Day, like it kept being in the past 3 years, it kept being one of the top three holidays. And I think because we talk about it very often on our social media and things like that, so now people have made it a thing to
Okay.
masturbate on Groundhog's Day. But this year it lost to Valentine's Day, which what I found very funny. But yeah, we have a special place in our heart for Groundhog's Day. We always mention it on our like social media when it's Groundhog's Day to be like, don't forget to masturbate because this is our most popular holiday. But it's always the one that like cracked me up. The first year we found out, we were like, what? Like, what does that even mean? But it cracks me up.
Yeah, it seems totally random to me, but I could see
Yes,
if you were talking about it, it's like, when a big investor comes out and talks about something and then creates the very thing that they talked about because everybody follows
exactly,
it. But
exactly. We really manifested Groundhog's Day to be really relevant again.
cool, yeah. Why not? It really wasn't relevant anyway. So
Yeah,
might as well make it something fun.
exactly.
I don't have in front of me the data for the sex experiments, but I know you
Mm.
had mentioned to me some of them. And so I think a lot of your sex experiments were geared around like, here are things that were enhancing women's orgasms and stuff. So share what the results of some of those were. What were some of the things that women really found enhanced their experience?
Yeah, yeah. So every month we release a sex experiment of the month of like, this is what we're all going to try and see like if our data changes and things like that. And then at the end of the month, we show the results of like what the aggregate was and also what yours was. Did it make it better than your baseline? Did it make it worse? And things like that. We've done all sorts of fun ones. Like socks is one because there's like a myth that socks makes you have better orgasms. Doing it in the nighttime versus daytime. Doing it what have other caffeine, alcohol, mindful, mutual, masturbation, edging, all sorts of different kind of things. But I would say in the years that we've done it, edging is like top notch. I would say like always consistent, higher orgasms, better orgasms. Caffeine is an interesting one. It always does have a little bit more of like stronger orgasms, and they tend to get to the orgasm a little bit quicker. Um, so I always say like caffeine's a really easy, accessible one if you're not like we don't obviously do a sex experiment on THC, but I will say anecdotally, THCs we've seen consistently, like you definitely have better orgasms, much stronger and just a lot longer. So I'm always like, if you live in a place that is, accessible, it's legal, like it's an interesting one to try. I think it's very, very, I think there's something very powerful there that I hope gets studied a lot more. I know there's a lot of taboo within government to want to really pursue those studies, but I think especially for people having sexual dysfunction, all of that can be an incredible way to really heal.
You could get
Um,
that done in California. You could get that
yes,
study done there.
in California, like THC lubricants always look really an interesting one, but obviously we don't do it for sex experiments. We don't encourage everyone to go do it, but I will always say anecdotally, if you are interested and you have access to it, like really interesting data. And then, yeah, I think the ones I've said, I think the sex experiments we've always seen list on highest in satisfaction has been mindful masturbation, mood setting, edging, caffeine, and then yeah, I would say like those are the kind of the most popular ones.
Where did alcohol fit in on that list?
Yeah, alcohol's interesting. It always doesn't do great, and I think I always get the kind of people are like, really? And then they're like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense. It's kind of the reaction that I get very often. Alcohol always kind of gets low, or like people don't actually finish to have an orgasm with the alcohol one. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. At least that's like how my body works. Like I've had alcohol data like on my own data, and I'm always like, alcohol, like I just know is not going to help get to an orgasm. It's going to take forever in the worst way possible. And then I like have a hard time concentrating. And when it happens, it's not that exciting to me. So to me, it makes sense. But yeah, people always are like, really? Because it's kind of like what people call the social lubricant. But it might make it more like the experience of this, the journey of it a lot more fun. But at least the outcome of the orgasm has always been a little bit disappointing.
And I'm not at all surprised to hear that either, which is why I asked about it specifically, because it does have that reputation as the social lubricant. But my personal experience and the experience of many people I've worked with says that when it comes to the actual experience of sex itself, it gets in the way. Not only does it make it harder for women to orgasm, it actually makes it harder for men to orgasm, and it actually makes it harder for men to achieve and maintain an erection as well. So we have this idea that, oh, you know, if we go out and have a few drinks, we're more likely to have, you know, sex and it's going to be great and all that. And that the data and, you know, my anecdotal experience do not prove that at all. It actually proves the opposite. And so I just wanted people to hear that. The only thing alcohol does is lower your inhibitions, make it such that you are more likely to end up naked in bed with somebody having sex.
Exactly.
But everything from there on out is probably not going to be
great.
good.
Yeah. So I'm always like, if you want to dance at a club, you want to make out with somebody, like grind on someone, yes, alcohol probably can definitely help you do that. But the orgasm itself, it's consistently not seeing good data results. And I think that always disappoints people. But then I think the more that people think about it, they're like, I guess that makes sense. So yeah, I think we're all on the same page.
You know, both of us, you and myself, are trying to help people have better orgasms and better sex. So it's important for them to know that alcohol is not helping you, people. It's not helping you.
Yes. Drink a cup of coffee. I always say, like, if you're going to do something, at least then drink a cup of coffee. That'll help a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Anna, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. I found this stuff really fascinating. I hope the listeners did also. Tell people how they can find out about your products and anything else that you want to share with them.
Yeah, so our website is Lioness, like a female lion.io. You could find us on Instagram at Lioness Health. You can find, I also post like my own data and like I do my own little sex experiments like within myself and then I show my data. So you could find me on Instagram as Anna is average or on TikTok as Anna the average. I'm at some point going to merge them. I don't know why my both screen names are totally different from each other. And then you can always purchase the Lioness on our website. And we actually have a code for the listeners here. The code is LOVELAB and you'll get $20 off. And that'll be readily available to you as soon as this podcast goes out.
Yeah, and that code and the link are in the description, so you can check that out. Anna, thank you again for coming on the show. And, you know, first of all, thank you for doing what you do. I think that we've got so much more data now than we had before. And I just think that's so important. So thank you for that. And then, of course, thank you for coming on the show and sharing it with us.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully, the more fun things we learn, I'll come back and tell you all the fun knowledge and research that we've done. It's a forever growing thing. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. If you do new studies and you have new interesting data, I would love to have you back on and talk about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
All right. All right, everybody. That's all the time I have for this episode, and I will see you next week. I hope you liked this episode of the LOVELAB podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with your friends. And for more free exclusive content, join me in the Passion Vault at kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. That's kevinanthonycoaching.com/vault. Thanks for listening. And remember, as Celine used to say, you're amazing.